Hi everybody and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name's Lysha. I am the owner of Lysha Be Creative, and today's tutorial is a really simple but cute inspired design by this set of nails I saw on Pinterest. So I'm going to show you how I worked through the process of putting this onto a tumbler, and of course everything I use will be listed and linked down in the description box down below. Let's go ahead and get right into today's tutorial. So today I am starting with a 30-ounce modern curve tumbler from Maker Flow Crafts, and so I'm going to go ahead and get this tumbler prepped for today's video. And so I'm just going to do my typical prep process, and that of course is removing this tiny silver piece on the bottom of my cup. Not all cups come with this, but depending on who your cup vendor is, you might find this little sort of either metal or plastic silver plated piece down at the bottom. I always remove them. I've never epoxied over them, but I know some people who have. I just prefer to remove them so that no potential air or anything gets trapped in there and maybe causes issues with my epoxy. So for this cup, the intention originally was to keep the bottom half of the cup stainless steel. So I am going to show you that process in case you are someone who maybe doesn't like to epoxy the bottom of your cup. And this could be done for various reasons. Maybe because it's sometimes difficult with epoxy to get a super flat bottom without having a wobbly cup and needing to do a lot of sanding. Sometimes people prefer just kind of this clean stainless steel look on the bottom of their cup. I don't think there's any really other benefits that I have found. I know some people say that, you know, it prevents if someone drops it from cracking. For me, I don't really find that that's the case, because I think that if you still drop it, depending on how you drop it, you know, you're still going to end up getting a crack potentially. So obviously still be careful with your tumblers. This keeping the bottom clear certainly doesn't prevent any sort of cracks from happening if a cup is dropped. So after I've gotten my tape section applied to the bottom of the cup, gonna go ahead and clean that off with some 91% rubbing alcohol, and then of course we're going to take this over to the spray tent. So it was raining this week, and so I needed to do any of my prep work as far as spray painting inside versus outside. So this is sort of my setup. It's not the best setup, and I'm still continuing to kind of work with what's going to be a good setup. Before this, I literally was spray painting a cup into a box with the door open, which is still not very great. This is definitely a better setup than I had been using before when the weather would be inclement or not able for me to get outside to prep. But I do find that aside from having this spray tent and sort of this stand that I use, I am going to get, you know, just like a Lazy Susan or something, so I don't have to continue to put it on this piece of paper and just twirl it. It would make it a lot easier, obviously, if I had like a Lazy Susan or something to twirl my cup. So if you have a super cool, you know, spray paint process as far as indoors, let me know. I'm not going to go too fancy with like a vent system or anything, but something just to use when the weather's not that great. So once that spray paint was completely dry, and that was a rustic pink color from Rustoleum, I'm going to go ahead and get this right on the turner. I am going to leave that tape on until the very end, but what I'm mixing is 2 parts, or equal parts I should say, of Flint Sisters Supply Shop Fast Cure epoxy. And so I'm going to add a little bit of a glitter mica to this. So I'm adding the additive Diamond Magic from my Aisha Creations to just sort of give that base coat a little bit of sparkle and shine. So this cup only has 1 coat of epoxy as it stands right now. Typically now is where you could do your sanding process. So just the top rim for this cup, which I didn't show in this clip because you guys have seen me sand so often before. But now we're going to get into sort of this swirled look of the actual design. So again, this design was inspired by a set of nails that I saw on Pinterest, and it had sort of like this purple, deep plum purple and magenta colored swirl on like a pink base. And so I'm sort of recreating that here. It's not exactly the same exact colors as was used in the actual nail set, but it is pretty close. And so when you're using other images as inspiration, I definitely don't feel like you have to always stick to those colors. Sometimes I will if I really like the color palette. However, I don't always naturally gravitate towards those colors. Sometimes I'm just really inspired by the actual design and will kind of put my own twist on that in terms of putting this design onto a tumbler. So all I've done so far is just put a little bit of medium magenta in a medicine cup with a little bit of rubbing alcohol. I also have both Villain from Jen's Crafted Gems with just a drop or two of Phone Home into that cup for the purple. I needed to deepen the purple just a little bit, and so I tested out kind of my swatches on my paper towel there just to make sure they were the color, vibe, and palette that I was going for. And now we're going to go into applying our inks. So when you're applying inks, as far as like this technique goes, I will say that you need less ink than you think. I was going for a very sort of fluffy kind of look, like a very pale fluffy look. Like I didn't want the colors to be super vibrant. So I'm going to be introducing a lot of rubbing alcohol into my design here. So I'm starting with just a few pounces of the medium magenta with a little bit of rubbing alcohol in there, and just sort of using my fine paintbrush to sort of dab out or pounce out that color and really spread it along. Again, don't want a super vibrant look. I want more of like a wispy cloud look with these sort of sections, the section of ink. And so I'm going to introduce quite a bit of my alcohol back and forth to be able to lighten up this color on the tumbler. So I always have handy a bunch of paper towels because I don't want my cup to get like too juicy with the inks, because when that happens, typically then you'll get a lot of running and you don't want to have to chase your inks. So having a paper towel handy really does allow me to control how much I'm putting on my tumbler, as well as ensure that I don't get a whole bunch of sort of running all over the cup where I feel like I have to try and chase that all with my paintbrush. So I'm starting with my initial swirl of this magenta color, and I'm just continuing to add alcohol, rubbing alcohol, just to stretch my color out so I can go all the way around the cup for that initial swirl. Now that I've gotten the magenta color on there in sort of that look, I'm going to come back and introduce the purple color directly on top of the magenta. So in the nail art, it kind of almost was like the two colors very much looked like they intertwined and really were almost the same color, just like deeper and darker in some sections. And so I'm sort of intertwining these colors. I don't want the swirl section to be too wide where it takes up the entire cup. I still want it to be very playful, very dainty, very simplistic in sort of the overall design. And so I want to still be able to see that sparkle and shine from that rustic pink base. And so I want to make sure that I am really being mindful of how much space I'm using to create this alcohol ink swirl on the cup. So you guys have seen a lot of my tutorials in the past where I have done sort of these like inked swirled looks. I think there's a lot of different ways to do this. I know I've done this way with just like a paintbrush and inks. I've also done it on a turner, right, where you use epoxy to sort of dip those colors in. There's so many different ways to sort of play with alcohol inks and get alcohol inks applied to the cup. And it's all based on, you know, what is the look that you're going for. For this always gives me more of a marbled look with this sort of technique versus like just using, you know, a sponge of some sort to continue to like pounce colors on, which gives you a more vibrant, more sort of, I would say like underwater sea look, like sort of that blended look. This definitely gives me sort of that marble looking color. So once I'm pretty satisfied with the introduction of like the swirl, I'm gonna go back and take a couple sections now to attempt to do some alcohol ink flowers here. If you guys have been following me for a little bit of time, I am not the best hand painter by any means, but I have really been trying to kind of stretch my creative ability and really get into doing more hand painted art, if that makes sense, especially in the sense of florals, because I really love the look of a hand painted floral cup. And I haven't quite yet nailed one, but I'm starting kind of small, taking small opportunities to kind of practice those kinds of techniques. And so this was a really fun way to do it, because at the end of the day, if I didn't like how my flowers were turning out, I could easily just go back over those sections with just a little bit of alcohol ink in my brush and just sort of blend them out and make that part of the swirl. All in all, I really just wanted to kind of try this out. This was just sort of a very fun and playful kind of look I was going for this cup that was inspired by the nails. And so I hope that this is something that maybe is helpful for you, especially if you are maybe like me and trying something new. Sometimes I'll just pick out designs that kind of help me work on some of those techniques to sort of get some practice out. So I got a little bit of ink splatter. So after I was done with my flowers, sort of the base of them, just clean that up with just straight rubbing alcohol and a little bit of paper towel just to sort of wipe those sections out. And so now I'm going to go back through and I'm going to use my alcohol ink markers, which I've literally had in my stash of craft supplies for literally probably 3 years now. And so I don't always get to use these, but this was like the perfect opportunity to use them. Now you don't have to have alcohol ink markers for this. You could actually use a really fine paintbrush to establish the same exact depth and sort of line work that I'm doing here. I'm just finding some of those sort of detailed lines and just making them a little bit more defined by going over them with the same kind of colored marker. It just sort of helps those sort of, you know, lines of the inks to just really stand out and really just kind of pop in the sort of flow of this alcohol ink swirl. So you could do the same exact thing again with a super fine paintbrush like I have on my table there, and your actual, you know, inks that you were using to begin with to just darken up some of those sections. I'm now just going around my florals, just kind of tracing around them just to make them stand out a little bit more. It's certainly up to you how, you know, defined you want those florals to be at the end of the day, depending on, you know, how your swirl has come out and how your florals have come out. Now we are back on the turner. After I've done that, I let this set overnight. Again, I don't ever seal my inks, but I did let it sit until it was completely dry, so that was overnight. I'm coming back to the turner and I'm gonna go ahead and add another coat of epoxy here. So now we're up to 2 coats of epoxy on this cup, and here's where I totally forgot to tape off the bottom as well as keep that stainless steel bottom open. So I probably will go back and paint over this bottom section, but once I am done and I've torched my tumbler, I'm gonna come back with Luna. Luna is from Myra over at Myra Makes It. She launched glitter a while back and still has some ideas for launching glitter certainly in the future, but I was able to snag this really beautiful sort of white shifty glitter. It's like a pink peach to yellow color, and on this rustic pink base, it really does brighten up this entire tumbler. I know you wouldn't think something that like shifts pink to yellow really would make this super vibrant, but I really love how the yellow really played into the background of the tumbler and really just gave it this really beautiful, dainty but sparkly finish. So I'm just following the swirl pattern that I created with the inks here on the tumbler with a little bit of Luna there. We're gonna let this sit, of course, until it is cured, and then once we are ready, we'll go ahead and add our decal. So I grabbed this decal off of Creative Fabrica. This is one of those like She Is decals. I've seen these all over and I've actually never had the opportunity to use them. I was just looking for something kind of simple and really simple but powerful to put on a cup, and so I stumbled across these. It was like, oh my gosh, this would be such a perfect sort of decal to put on this cup. And so this is a She Is Powerful decal, and so I'm gonna go ahead and weed this because it has such tiny lettering. This decal was only 3 inches wide. I wanted to make sure that I didn't accidentally pull up the letters that I do need to be on the cup. So I like to reverse weed a lot of these sort of smaller decals. And a lot of you had commented the last time I did this that I could have just, you know, kept it on my mat and weeded it from there. If you've ever seen my mats, they're not usually sticky. And actually right now I've had to tape vinyl to it in order to get the vinyl to stay on the mat so that it'll cut it. My Cricut will cut it. I really need new mats, but I've, you know, washed them probably 85 too many times and they're just no longer sticky, so I really need to just get new mats. So that's why sometimes I'll just tape the decal to the table and then of course reverse weed that way. Sort of same deal, just a couple extra steps. So we're gonna go ahead and get this placed, then remove the transfer tape, and then this cup, of course, you guys know, will go on the turner for 2 final coats of epoxy. I will probably come back and paint the base. I just haven't landed on a color yet, but 2 final coats of epoxy and this tumbler is completely finished. I really hope that you guys enjoyed today's tutorial. Definitely let me know what you thought of it in the comments. Let me know if you are into the hand-painted floral game like I am, and if you have any tips for me. And of course, you guys know that I will see you very soon in the next one. Bye!